Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different. So one of the issues that I'm noticing is that you have a lot of people who they're using a database, but they wanted to do something specific to their unit, whether it's at their level or based off whoever's watching this video. They want a database to do specifically what they want. And the best way to do that is kind of going back to the basics and learning how to build a database yourself. So I'm going to start doing a series. This is the first video of creating your own database and going step by step, for those who aren't database savvy, to kind of teach people how to use databases. So in this video in particular, we're going to be going over first tables, which is the basics of your database, which is storing data. If you hear any background noise, forgive me, that's my wonderful wife and kids. Yeah, but basically the intent of this video is this video and the next video is going to teach you how to do the majority of what you're going to be using databases for, which is putting data into the database and running queries. So the first thing we're going to do is I have a test file here, and the test file has some basic stuff. Now obviously it doesn't have any personal information in here, so it just, like, I have a whole bunch of John Smiths, Smith 1, Smith 2, and a bunch of fake socials. So these are the fake socials that I have. So we're going to pretend that this is the data that you want to put in your database. And so let me close this. So just like anybody who's imported data into a database, or I'm sorry, if you've imported text data into Excel, inserting it into a database is pretty much the same way. There are some differences. So first thing you're going to want to do is you want to go and open up a blank access database. So you're going to go over here. It's going to give you an option for blank database. Now it might look a little bit different. I'm running Windows 10 here. Depending on what version of Windows and what version of Access you have, it's going to look a little bit different. But for the most part, you should be seeing around the same thing. So we're going to click on blank database, and you're going to want to name your database. So I'm going to name this testDB for test database. And I'm going to save this to my desktop. So, okay, I'm going to click create. Now the beauty of doing it in these videos is if I'm going too fast or going too slow, you have the capability of, versus a traditional classroom, you can't really always tell the instructor to stop and go back to the beginning or rush. So this gives you the capability of jumping forward in the video if you already know some of this information, or if there's a step that you missed, that you can go back and go over that step again. So here, automatically already creates a blank table for us, which is table 1. So one thing that you need to understand about databases is there are different ways that you can put data into it. So one of the methods of putting data, if you don't already have data, is importing the data manually. So we have a blank table here. Now there's a button over here. This is your design view over here on the bottom right. If you click on design view, it's going to first have you name your table. So I'm always going to start a table name with TBL for table, and then I'm going to just name this main. And notice the format and how I title it. The first thing I'm going to put is what it is, so it's a table, so TBL, and then I'm going to just put this as my main table. You can name this whatever you want on your own personal database. Table records or table forms, whatever you want to know. I can't spell right now. But I'm going to leave this as table main and hit OK. And so basically, it's going to show you the different fields. So let's say I want the first field to be name, and the data type. Okay, got it. The data type I'm going to put as text. I'll leave this as long text. Yes. And then let's say I'm going to put social, which this one is going to be. Now for social, you want to always leave it as short text. And the reason why is because if you have a social that starts with zeros, if you change it in, like let's say we have a social that's 0, 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you try to save this as a so hypothetically, let's go over here. So yeah, I'm going to save it. Yes, I saved it. So look, I got a name, so I'm going to put Smith John and then the social, I'm going to put 000 1 2 3 4 5, right? So I'm going to go back into design view, and if I go back into there, it saves it exactly how it's supposed to, because some socials do start with zeros. But if I change this to a integer or a number, and I go back, yes, it automatically deletes all those zeros in front of it. So anytime you're bringing in a social, you want to make sure that importing your data or bringing your data into there, that you have these data types put in, you know, specific to how you want it. So obviously I want to keep this as a short text. And obviously I would correct that. Now this is of course the manual way of doing this. You can go in here, you're going to do 4, and then I want to add another record, so I'm going to put Gomez, Julian, and then put their social on there. So this is one way of making a table. Now that, obviously, that for the majority of the people that are going to be watching this video, this is not how you're going to do it. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to delete this. So what I have is my little test per.db file, a test file that I've named here. So what I'm going to show you right now is how to import that file into your database, so that way you're not manually inputting stuff in there each time. And so every time you update that file, like you download a file with all your records in there, it's a lot easier to put it in the database each time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to external data, and we're going to go to new data source, from file, and text file. Now it's important to make sure that there is a side that goes for import and another side for export. If you click this, it's going to try to save data to your computer. If you do it from the import side, it's going to bring data from your computer into the database. So make sure that you're selecting the right one. So we're going to select from text file, and we're going to find my little test file. So I'm going to go to my documents, and of course you can set this up to wherever you're at. So I'm going to put this to test file, hit open. Now I have options here, so I can import all the files in the database in a table. I can also append a copy of all the records. Appending basically means that I am adding the records to a current database that I have in here, that the records aren't already in there. So if I already have a record for Smith John, it's not going to add that record in there. It's only going to add new records in there. And then linking. So basically linking means it doesn't save the data in the actual database. All it's doing is reading that text file each time. So for this particular example, we're going to do import, meaning we're actually going to pull all the data into the database. So it's saved locally in the database. So first thing it's going to do is it's going to kind of give you this thing of how you're going to delimit this information. Now if you notice, it's all kind of garbled together. So what you want to do is you want to go next, and you want to make sure that depending on how your information is spread out, this is tab delimited. So basically meaning that there's tabbed spaces between each of the data, so that way you could separate, you know, what's what. If I change it to semicolon, it's all going to come together. If I separate it by comma, it's all together, because that's not how the data was separated. It was separated by tabs. Another important thing is if your data has headers, that you want to select this, so that way all your headers are on the top. Okay, now the next part is where it's going to get a little bit more interesting. So you have several ways of doing this. So I have about 9, 10 different fields that I have in here. So what I want to do is I want the database to read this as a date. The problem is that right now it's reading it as an integer, meaning a number. I don't want that. What I want to do is I want to come in here, because automatically this thing is going to, if I change this to a date with time, it's going to look for the normal date of month / day / year. So what I want to do is I want to change that. So I'm going to go to advanced, and I want to change the date order from month, date, year to year, month, date, because that's the military date format. And then I'm going to delete this date delimiter. Basically it's saying this is how the year, month, and date are separated, but we don't have any slashes here, so I'm going to delete that. Hit OK. And then I'm going to go to the next field. Now this is short text, so I want to leave this as it is. Now I'm on another date right here for the 0 state. I can, since I've already changed the format of the date, all I have to do is just come in here and change it to date with time. And then again, however I want to leave this data. So DLab, I'm going to leave that as a number. DML, I'm going to leave tech, this is date of birth, so I'm going to change this to date with time. Date of rank, I'm going to change to date with time. Date last PCS, date with time. Erupt is short text, ETS, date with time. So, I mean, you guys pretty much get the idea. Grade, I'm going to leave that as a number. Number, this is a text, all the Smith Johns. I'm going to leave, I want this to be, because it's a social, I want to leave this as a short text. Short text, because again, if I put it as a number, it's going to delete all these zeros in front, and the UIC is already a short text. So now that I've imported the data in here like this, if I always import these same fields in this same order, I don't want to have to go through these steps every single time. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to Advanced, and you're going to go to something called Specs, but you're going to do Save As, and I'm going to do, it's already kind of automatically tries to save the name as test file import specs. Just shorten that, specs. If I hit, when I hit OK, basically it's saving the format that I did. So then if I, so let me hit cancel, right? So now if I want to go back in here, go from file, go to text, I browse and go back to that test file, it's not going to know what I did, because databases need to be told exactly what's going on here. So basically I'm going to go back to Advanced, I'm going to go to Specs, I only have one in there, which was my test file. I'm going to hit Open. It already has the year, month, day format and the tab delimited. It's already saved everything as I wanted it to, as I did previously. So then this way, every time you download the same data onto your computer, you don't have to go through the steps every single time, as long as you save your specs before you import it. If you import it, then you can't go back and save the specs. You'll have to go through the whole steps all over again. So now that those are saved in there, I'm going to go next. Now, primary key. So a primary key basically says that only one of these fields should be in there at a time. So a primary key is something very specific to each record, such as a social. For specifically in this one, it would be social. So I would change this to soldier SSN. And that means that if there are two individuals with the same social on here, it's not going to upload both of them. It's only going to upload one of them. And this is good. Having tables with a primary key prevents duplicate records from being put in your table. So that way the same John Smith isn't put on your table and you're not tracking them twice. You can use different fields, but keep in mind that if you do something like their date of birth as their primary key, there may be several people with the same birth date. So if you put someone who has a January 1st birthday of 1990, some of the soldiers are that young, then it may delete duplicate records just because they had the same birthday. So you want to make sure that you want something very specific. Name can be kind of tricky only because there may be a soldier who has the same exact name. So social is usually the best way to go through. When it comes to reenlistments, you may want to do RCN because that's very specific to a reenlistment. So we're going to leave it as is. I'm going to go next, and then I'm going to import to table. So I'm going to name the table. So again, I'm going to put this to table, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this as table import. All right, and the reason I'm doing it that way is because I'm going to save 3 different tables. So I'm going to hit finish, and it's going to import all that data into a table. Close, and there's my new table. So there it has all the data that I just imported. So again, this is the way you import it, where you're saving the data to the actual database. Now, if let's say I didn't want to save it to the database, let's say I knew where the file was, I'm going to keep that file on my desktop the whole time, but I want to keep the database small. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do another method. So I'll go through the same steps. I'll import from file, text file. I'm going to browse. I'll go back to that test file. And in order to save steps, now this time I'm going to do link. Okay. And then I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to go to my specs because I already have my test file specs. Hit open, and then OK. Now, again, keep in mind that if you were going to import the same file each time to your database, that you have to make sure that these fields are in the same place. If one week I have BASD here, and then next week I have it there, there's going to be a problem because the database doesn't know, hey, you know, it doesn't identify this data by their name. It identifies by where it is. So if I move BASD over here and date of rank over here, we're going to run into problems because it's going to think the second field right here is city, when in actuality we move date of rank there, and it's going to come up with an error. So make sure that however you're pulling your data in, however you're saving your data, whatever order the fields are in, that you're saving it the same way every single time. So we're going to go to next. Next, all my stuff's already done, so I'm going to name this to table link, because we linked to this table. Hit finish, and it finished linking. So now, if you see this little table link here, now basically all it's doing is every time I double click this, it's going to look for that text file and then it's going to pull it in. None of the data is actually saved in the database. This is great if you want to keep your database small, but the problem with this is that whenever you're running queries to look for information, it takes a little bit longer because every single time it has to look for that text file. It's not. But the beauty of this too is you don't ever have to import this. All you have to do is like if I want to update this file, all I have to do is replace it, and then when I go back in the database and double click on this file, I don't have to upload because it's getting the fresh data that I just uploaded. With this one, every time I open this, it's only going to be data that's based off the last time I imported. I'm going to have to re-import data into this database. But all the data is stored in this database, so it's a lot easier for me to run queries because all the data is saved locally in this database. Again, appending just means it's adding. So if I went through these steps again and went from file, text, and I wanted to append it to my import file, then all it's going to do is add new records to this import file. It's not going to actually create a new data. It's not going to create a new table. So that's something that you want to keep in mind whenever you're doing that. Now, another thing to keep in mind is whenever you link a file, you can't make any changes to it from here. So once it's linked, you like if I go to this table import where all the data is saved in here, if I go in here and I want to change the name of this from BASD to something else, I can do that because all the data is stored here. But if I try to do this with the table link, because it's a linked file, when I go in the design view, it tells me that I can't modify it. I can still open it, but I can't make any changes to it because it's not saved locally. It's just linked. Now, if ever you decide, hey, I don't want to save, like right now it's linked to a file that's right here. It's linked to my desktop. If I look right here, it says file users will desktop. If I ever decide to move this file, like let's say I move it from here to, let me move it to my HRD program, right? When I try to double click here, it can't find it. So there's a quick way of fixing that. You can right click, you can go to where is it? Link Table Manager. I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit prompt for new location. I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to ask me where the file is. Now I just save that to HRD program. Hit open. I'm going to select it, open, and there it goes. So now when I go back in there it is again. So anytime I move that file, I have to relink it to wherever it's at. So now you know how to import the data. Now, keeping in mind that all this does is import the data. Now you can make changes to it, but you can't really do searches with it. This really kind of just limits you on what you're capable of doing. So you want to make sure that that once you get the data in, this is again the basics of it. Import your data into the database, and then on the next video we're going to go into queries, and queries is going to allow you to actually do searches or make changes to your data And there are a lot of different queries. There's delete queries, append queries, make table queries. Now, as far as your database, at this point, if you're a career counselor and you're watching this, then what's important about this is, for one, I would recommend that you import a table that has your UICs along with your unit information. And in the queries, I'm going to kind of show you why. But you can actually import data that's not from a table. You can import pretty much anything. So let's import from file from Excel. Okay, so I'm going to hit browse, and I have a, let's see, I have a strength. No, let's do MLS strengths right here. I'm going to go here. I want to import this because I want it all saved in here, because again, it works faster when it's in here. So I'm going to hit import. I want to select the right one. I have two sheets on here, so I want to select the second one. I'm going to go next. My first row contains headers. Now, if you notice on this one, it kind of has the same format. It's going to ask you what each field is. You can actually change the name of each field. Next, I can select a primary key. For this primary key, I'm going to have that as PMOS because those are very specific. I'm going to hit next. Let me change this to table OS strings. Finish. Oh, yeah. Okay. So there are my MLS strengths. And the reason why it came up with an error was because I have multiple languages. So I tried to make it to where the primary key was PMOS, but the problem is that you have 35 papas that have different languages, so I have multiple 35 papa ones. So I couldn't make that as my primary key. So again, that teaches you, what you can and can't make a primary key. So if you're watching this video and you're not a career counselor, you're just trying to learn how to make databases. This is just the basics. Making a database does take a period of time. You'll see people's databases, and some people can make them really quick, but that again comes from knowing the basics. Before you can make queries and make reports and make forms, you got to learn how to get the table or that information in your database in the first place. So importing your data is one of the basic things. You can import from Excel. You can actually import from another database, where you search for Access database or any of these other database types. Typically, if you're using Access, you'll probably import from another Access. But let's say you have a table that's in another database, like I have a version of the Rock here, which is another database. Let's say I want to get the unit table from the Rock that is already in there. I can just go from database from Access. I'm going to go browse. I'm going to go to the Rock, hit open. I want to import tables, or in this case, I don't want to import them. Well, I have the option of importing or linking. In this one, I'm going to actually import, and let's say I want to do UOC table, right? Okay. It's going to automatically get those fields. Since it's coming from another database, it already knows what field types they are. So I'm going to close. And again, there's no information in there, but it pulled that table. If the Rock had all this information filled out in that database, then it would have pulled it into this database. So if you have information in another database that you want to pull into your database, it's pretty easy. You just have to search for it from external data. So I hope this answers some questions as far as how to make a database, how to at least from the basics make a database. In the next video, I'm going to go over queries. Now, I think that importing data and making queries is probably going to be the most important thing, because if, like, let's say you're a battalion career counselor, you're a retention ops, and you need to pull information real quick, being able to pull your data in quickly, maybe your on-orders report, maybe your re-enlistments information, and being able to run a query quickly, something that's not in a database, that's something specific, it's a good tool to have. If you are not a career counselor and you're just watching this video, again, if you need to pull information, if you need to pull data into your database and you need to find information, let's say you want to find everybody with the last name Smith, running a query learning how to make a query. You can't run a query until you learn how to pull your data. So again, if you have any questions, please put it in the comment section. If you know how to contact me, you can email me. Preferably, just leave a comment or a question in the comment section, and I will try and answer as quickly as possible. But hopefully this helped. Hopefully this helps a lot of you guys on starting to make your own database. The idea is that becoming more proficient in databases to become better data analysts for all career counselors or for anybody who's just interested in databases. So hope that you guys got a lot of information out of this, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.